You're listening to the Divorce and Your Money Show, the #1 divorce podcast in the United States. I'm your host, Sean Lehman, MBA and certified divorce financial analyst. Be sure to get a copy of my new book called, surprise, surprise, Divorce and Your Money, How to Avoid Costly Divorce Mistakes. You can get a copy on Amazon or by visiting divorceandyourmoney.com. While you're on the website, be sure to book a strategy session with me. We have 30-minute strategy sessions, and you have two options. One in which where you can just speak directly about issues that apply to you, regardless of whether you're at the beginning of the divorce, thinking about what you want to do, in the middle, trying to figure out the right path to take, or at the end of your divorce and you're trying to figure out the best options for you. And also there we have a document review appointment where we can review your financial affidavit, your divorce settlement, or other documents related to your divorce, and also include a strategy session on top of that to make sure that whatever you're preparing or about to sign is in your best interest. With that, on to this week's episode. It's been a little while since I have done an episode, and it's been a very busy couple of months, so apologies about that. But I want to discuss a topic that's been coming up quite a bit in the coaching calls, and that is how you handle inheritances and gifts during divorce. It's a tricky question, and it's an important question because oftentimes your parents or someone will leave you a substantial sum, and you want to protect that during the divorce process. Sometimes those inheritance money comes at a poorly timed time where you can't control it. Someone passes away, unfortunately, and you receive some money maybe right before divorce or during the divorce process, and you're trying to figure out, well, what should you do? I mean, I just spoke with someone the other day who had filed for divorce, and then unfortunately a parent passed away kind of 8 months into the divorce process, and they were wondering, well, how do we handle this new inheritance that arose and what to do about that? And so in this episode, I want to give you some tips when it comes to handling gifts or inheritances and how to protect that property. And really the main thing is how do you prevent it from becoming community property, which is the property that is subject to or that you're going to end up having to split as part of the divorce process. So let's go through a few quick tips. The first thing is if you receive an inheritance or you receive a gift from someone, keep that stuff in your name only. Meaning, if you get some money, let's just say $100,000, because I'm going to use that as an easy example. If a parent passes away and gives you $100,000, don't deposit that into a joint bank account. Set up a separate bank account that's in your name only, and we're going to call it your inherited funds account. And so put the money in that bank account separately so that it doesn't get commingled with the other assets. And, that could get complicated because not always is an inheritance a gift. Sometimes it may be a home or a car or any other types of property. Whatever it is, make sure to title it in your name only. The second thing is don't let your spouse make any contributions to that gift or that inheritance. And the house is an easiest way to illustrate that. And so if you inherit a house and let's just say it's been run down for a little bit and it needs some repairs to get it up to speed. Well, one of the things that you should do is don't let your spouse contribute financially to those repairs, because the value increase of that house or even the whole house itself, depending upon where you are, could now come into question as part of the divorce process. And, sometimes this may be a house that you maybe just made renovations or adjustments on a few years ago, and now the divorce process is happening. And now you're wondering, well, is any part of that house marital property because my spouse helped renovate the master bathroom and bedroom in there? And so if that's your situation, be very careful and think through what you're going to do with that inherited property. And if you can keep your spouse from making contributions to it, financial or labor even, then you should do so. The third thing is consider transferring that inheritance or gift to a trust. Now, oftentimes, a parent who was savvy in estate planning, or at least inheritance, or most commonly from parents, which is why I use that example, are very savvy in their estate planning. And so oftentimes, as part of their estate, is they will give you that property, be it cash or the home or whatever, or jewelry or whatever it may be, and they might require it be put in a trust as part of the process. But if that wasn't the case for you, I would consider setting up a trust. Now, there's lots of complications and nuances to having a trust set up for you. But what I would do is if you have an inheritance coming or you recently got one or you're thinking about it, I would go and look for an attorney called an estate planning attorney or a trust attorney. And they're one and the same. And they can illustrate options for you to set up a trust. Now, usually there's some fees involved, of course. We're talking about legal work, but it can be worth a little bit of trust setup in the short term to protect you in the long term. And then the last thing I would strongly suggest is keep really good records about where the inheritance came from, how much money was in there, where the funds went, et cetera, et cetera. One of the most common things that I deal with and see people make a mistake with is not keeping track of the money and keeping track of the details of an inheritance. And so what can happen is, let's just say you got an inheritance 7 years ago and you knew it was approximately $123,000, but you don't remember the exact math that was there. Well, one of the things that you can do, or the exact amount that was in there, because 7 years has passed and you want to know. Well, if you don't know what that amount was and your spouse is going to contest it in terms of how much was actually in that inheritance, you could be setting yourself up for a world of potential hurt, in that you may end up losing part of your inheritance in the divorce process since you didn't keep accurate records. And so one of the things that's most important to do is make sure that you keep track of the paperwork, keep track of any emails, keep track of any bank statements, keep track of any lawyer's correspondence or documentation to ensure that the information that you have from the inheritance is kept and kept track of over time and kept cleanly. Because one of the things that can happen is, let's just say, hypothetically, you've received an inheritance of that $123,000, and the next year you purchased a house with your spouse and use those funds as a down payment. That's something that's very common. And then 3 or 4 or 5 years or 10 years, whatever the amount is, goes by, and now you're facing divorce and you're like, well, I contributed $123,000 to that down payment of the house from this inherited gift. Well, the good news is that even though you may not have followed my initial steps or initial tips, my tips 1, 2, and 3, that you still may be able to get credit for that money as part of the divorce process and consider it still separate property if you have accurate records. But you need to make sure that you have very accurate records of where every dollar came from and where that inheritance money went. On the other hand, if you didn't keep accurate records, you may lose those funds and it may become a costly issue. And, it's something that you want to be very careful about. So it's one of those things where you need to make sure that you find every piece of documentation that you have related to that. Now, I've been talking mostly in the context of inheritances because that's the most common, but oftentimes I also see a parent give a gift to you or your spouse. And what can happen is, some money flows in. It's usually pretty informal, right? Gifts under, around $14,000 or so are not taxed, but sometimes they're bigger gifts. And you forget because of the size of the gift, to go through all of the steps and document everything. You may have just had a phone call with your mom or dad, and your mom or dad just said, I'm writing you a check here's a $10,000 check for some spending money. And if you're fortunate enough to have parents who are in that position, and then you're like, oh, great, this is a good check, and you use it for something important, but you want those funds back as part of the divorce process because you feel it's appropriate given the situation. Well, one of the things you should make sure that you do is you need to have a list of documentation from your parents. Your parents, your mom or dad should say, hey, I wrote you this check for $10,000. You should have some emails from the time of the check. You should have other correspondence from that time, and you should indicate that all of that stuff happened and happened smoothly, because that way you can prove where those funds came from. But just because it's casual, or just because you may not be thinking about it at the time, and divorce may not have even been on your radar at the time of the gift, which is okay, but you need to make sure that whenever money is coming in from a source, particularly a family member, that those transactions are documented and you gather that documentation. So the four most important tips for protecting your inheritance or gift in divorce, and I'll just go through them quickly. One is keep inheritances or gifts in your name only. The second is don't let your spouse make any contributions to that account or that property to ensure that it stays separate. The third is consider contacting an estate planner and transferring that inheritance or that gift to a trust. And fourth is keep really good records as to where that inheritance or gift came from. Now, before you go, I want to make sure you get some really important information. I'm going to tell you about a few things that may be of interest to you. First, as a favor, is if you could leave a review. If you're on the iTunes store, leave a review on iTunes, or if you search Divorce and Your Money on a website called Trustpilot or on Google, you can leave a review there. It's quick, it's anonymous, it only takes a few seconds, and I really, really appreciate your feedback. I have lots of reviews on iTunes and on Trustpilot, and I appreciate hearing your stories. Also, on divorceandyourmoney.com, you can get lots of great information. Of course, you can book a 30-minute strategy session directly with me. There's two types of strategy calls you can book. Just a normal strategy session, which we discuss the questions that are most pressing to you, regardless of where you are in the divorce process, be at the beginning, towards the end, or in the middle. Doesn't really matter. There's lots of great information we can cover during that strategy call. And also, we have a document review call. It's been one of the biggest things that we've done over the past year, which is you can send me your documents, be it your financial affidavit, a settlement agreement, or other documents that you would like for me to review. And then I review those in advance of the call, and then we get to discuss them in depth as part of a strategy session and get specific answers to some of the specific documents and things that you are considering. Also, for those who need ongoing support, we do have a few options for ongoing support, but regardless, it all starts with a coaching call that you can book at divorceandyourmoney.com. Don't forget to also get a copy of my new book. It's called Divorce and Your Money: How to Avoid Costly Divorce Mistakes. It's available on my website or also on Amazon. You just look me up and make sure you get the new edition. It is filled with excellent information regarding the divorce process, and I know that you will find it helpful. And once you've read the book, be sure to leave a review. That really helps me. I appreciate your feedback, and it also helps other people as they try and find this information. And finally, last but not least by any means, is on the store at divorceandyourmoney.com. If you click on the store button, you can get access to the full archive of podcast episodes. There's over 200 episodes, and what's great about the store link is that the episodes are organized in neat buckets. And they're organized by topic, so it's very easy to follow along with the information, and it is easy to pick out the key topics that matter most to you. And you can get all of those podcast episodes in the store. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Sean Lehman, MBA and Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. Take care.